Hello everyone! Now you will hear a brief recap of the movie Snitch. The film is based on true events. Jason Collins' best friend tries to persuade him to temporarily hold a large shipment of ecstasy pills. He'll be paid well and can even keep a couple of pills for himself. But the kid hesitates. It's too risky. His father, John Matthews, owns a construction company. On his way home, John noticed a responsible worker, Daniel, moving cement bags to protect them from the rain and decided to help him. Craig sent Jason the drugs by mail anyway. The frightened kid signed for and opened the box. Inside was a huge bag of pills and a GPS tracker. FBI agents immediately stormed the house. The panicked kid tried to run away through backyards, but it was pointless. The agents surrounded him from all sides and arrested him. John lives happily with his second family, but the idyll is shattered by a call from his ex-wife, Sylvia, asking him to come to the police station. Sylvia is in shock, believing Jason is a good boy. The ex-spouses met with a lawyer. The situation was much more serious than John thought. It was a federal crime. Moreover, Craig had sent the pills after he was arrested. He was promised a minimal sentence for this. So, Craig set Jason up? Yes. To reduce his own sentence, Craig informed them that Jason had agreed to store the drugs at his home. Sylvia hoped her son would get probation. However, the minimum sentence for that quantity of ecstasy pills is 10 years in prison. The parents weren't even allowed to post bail for their son. Jason was made the same offer as Craig. His sentence would be reduced if he helped arrest drug dealers. Instead of 10 years, he would serve only 1. Jason was asked to give up even friends who used illegal substances. But the young man refused. He didn't want to become a snitch. Through an acquaintance, John reached out to the district attorney, Joanna, and asked her to influence the situation. But everything was already decided. Jason would only get a reduced sentence if he cooperated. Suddenly, John offered himself. He would help arrest the drug dealers. But Joanna ignored his offer. Jason looked terrible. The beaten boy refused to talk about what the other inmates were doing to him. John felt he owed his son, whom he hadn't given enough attention to. Jason admitted he deserved punishment, but not so severe. He would never have sold that stuff. John also didn't know any dealers. So at night, he just got in his car, turned on a camera, and drove around the city looking for dealers. But they decided to simply rob him. The beaten John was lucky that a police patrol car happened to be nearby. John went back to the prosecutor. Joanna finally agreed to accept help from the persistent citizen, but the shipment had to be large. If it was cocaine, at least half a kilogram. John began looking into his workers' records. That same Daniel had been convicted twice for trafficking illegal substances. John gave the worker a ride and treated him to dinner at a cafe. He decided to use Daniel and asked him to reconnect with his old contacts, claiming he wanted to use his trucks to transport illegal goods. But Daniel refused. He wanted to start a new life and was ready to work hard every day. That chapter was closed for him. One more offense and he'd get a life sentence. John caught up with the worker and offered him $20,000 for the service, but he still refused. That evening, Daniel saw the local troublemakers his son was hanging out with. He didn't want the boy to end up like him. Like Daniel himself, his wife constantly worked hard. Need forced the ex-con to finally accept the boss's offer. They drove to a shady neighborhood. Daniel went to see a man named Malik, whose house was constantly occupied by a whole gang. Daniel told his old associate that he was out of the game and was here for the last time. After a while, they let John in, who managed to turn on a recorder. Malik immediately threatened the stranger with a gun. "If you were a cop, you'd be the biggest dick I've ever seen." John said he had a business and transport that could be used with minimal risks, claiming he was on the verge of bankruptcy and urgently needed money to stay afloat. The trucks could carry any weight. Malik agreed on the condition that John personally transport the first shipment. The authority figure ordered Daniel to go with the businessman. Malik also faced a life sentence, so he wanted to test his old friend too. Daniel already regretted getting involved in all this again. The gangsters checked John out. He really wasn't a cop. John went to the prosecutor and played the recording. Agent Cooper, who had arrested his son, was also in the office. Cooper warned that Malik was a real thug and dealt brutally with his enemies. Joanna promised to reduce Jason's sentence if they managed to arrest Malik. FBI agents installed bugs in the truck and Cooper advised John to be himself. The gangsters would spot fakeness. The partners had to drive all the way to Del Paso on the border with Mexico, over 1,000 miles. In the morning, they arrived at a scrapyard where an armed gang of Mexicans met them. John told the suppliers he planned to hide the goods in a cement bag. The gangsters opened 2 bags, poured out some cement, and stuffed packs of a much more expensive powder inside. The goods were thrown into the truck. Just then, another gang decided to attack the suppliers. A shootout began. The leader pulled out a machine gun and started mowing down the enemies. John needed to get out of there somehow. He didn't wait for the path to clear, so he first plowed through a pile of trash and then through a fence. An FBI agent's car also got hit. That night, a whole pile of bodies was buried. The Mexican authority, El Topo, positively assessed John's work and the new delivery method. Agents were in surveillance as the truck returned to the warehouse. Malik called and ordered the goods to be transferred to John's pickup. John himself called the FBI. The agents prepared for the final phase of the operation. Daniel saw the boss calling someone and pointed a gun at him. John swore he was talking to his wife. Agents followed the pickup with the goods. Malik's car appeared ahead. They stopped in a parking lot. Daniel hoped they would get paid and not just be shot. The handover occurred under FBI surveillance. John received $10,000. He was accepted into the business and offered much more serious work. Soon he would be introduced to important people. The agents were supposed to arrest Malik right then, but Cooper ordered to let him go. John looked for the FBI agents, but not waiting for them, went to the warehouse to patch the bullet hole. His second wife, Annalisa, demanded to know what was happening and was shocked to learn the truth. After all, her husband was now risking his life every day. The next day, John confronted the prosecutor because he had transported not half a kilo, but a whole 10 kilos. Why wasn't Malik arrested? The thing is, Cooper decided to go after the major suppliers as well. During work, Daniel noticed the boss had left urgently and followed him. John got a call from his first wife from the prison. Their son had been attacked. He was in the hospital with over 30 stitches. The kid wouldn't last long in prison and his father wasn't doing anything to help him. Daniel asked the boss what he was doing there and grabbed his head upon learning John had made a deal. After all, not only Malik was involved now, but also the Mexican cartel. And Daniel had a son too. At home, the worker was met by his furious wife. She had found the envelope with money and realized her husband was back to his old ways. Daniel got on his knees and begged Vanessa to pack their things and go to her mother's for a few days with their son. He was in serious trouble. The woman was disappointed in her husband. He had promised her so many times to quit. At home, John was waiting for Malik and his man. They took him back to the scrapyard in El Paso. There, Mexican gangsters checked him with a metal detector and also took his cell phone. El Topo wanted to meet John personally. He liked how the driver had handled the extreme situation, so he offered him to join the family. This time, John would go alone to Mexico and receive $250,000 for his work. Prove your loyalty and a brilliant future awaits you, my friend. John got his phone back. They would call him tomorrow. What about Malik? Now you work for us. Let's agree right away you work for me. Understood. Things had gone too far. John returned home and called Annalisa. The woman had left with the child to stay with her sister. But John understood he couldn't hide anywhere. From Cooper, he learned that El Topo was a former military man running the cartel's operations. Joanna guessed that this time John would be transporting not drugs, but money, the cartel's profit, hundreds of millions of dollars. Cooper asked to back off from John and arrest Malik instead. This is too dangerous. Yes, if he crosses the border, he'll never come back. Are you okay with that? Yes. Joanna was okay with that. The prosecutor blackmailed John with his son. In response, the man demanded Jason's immediate release if he went to Mexico. Cooper made it clear to John he didn't like this idea. The cartel always recruits people like you, middle class, those with kids. They blackmail and threaten them, and after using them, toss them in a barrel of acid. You're in for a serious ride. Keep that in mind. John visited his son. Each time he was beaten worse. Yet, they refused to transfer him to another block. His father told Jason he respected his stance, for refusing to set up his friends. Afterwards, John went to Daniel and thanked the man for not giving him away. The family man was panicking. After this conversation, he visited a gun store. At 10:30, John was given the address where he needed to go. The FBI had already installed bugs on the truck. But under a bridge, John switched to an identical truck and drove on. The agents wondered why he had been stationary for 15 minutes. But the driver was no longer in the cab, and Cooper had no idea where he had gone. John decided to play by his own rules, and Daniel would help him with that. John arrived at the specified address. The house indeed contained a whole mountain of money. He would cross the border in El Paso. The Mexicans would follow. It turned out a female prison guard worked for the cartel, and she had reported that John's son was in prison. The kid hadn't been identified earlier because he had his mother's surname. Meanwhile, Daniel waited for part of Malik's gang to leave. He attacked the remaining men, strangling some, shooting others. Finally, he got to the leader. From the wounded authority figure, he got El Topo's phone number and sent it to John. John himself called Cooper. The FBI would get El Topo's money, but it would happen on this side of the border. Cooper warned the transporter that the Mexicans already knew about his son. They promptly pointed guns at John and ordered him to stop. The man dictated El Topo's number so the agents could track it. John himself started firing back with a rifle. He was under fire from both sides. Luckily, he managed to get rid of one of the cars. A SWAT team stormed El Topo's house, but the cautious authority figure had already fled. However, Cooper was lucky to see the escaping gangster and ordered the road blocked. So, El Topo was finally arrested. Then the Mexicans decided to simply take out the rat and started shooting at the truck's tires. John not only managed to control the vehicle but also rammed 2 cars with criminals. 1 car remained. The truck finally flipped over. John was trapped. He tried to reload his rifle before the gangster reached him, but it was an FBI agent. Malik died in his house from blood loss. Daniel was reunited with his family, and the prosecutor took all the credit for arresting El Topo and seizing the huge sum of money. Unfortunately for John and his family, life would never be the same again. They entered the Witness Protection Program. Daniel, however, refused the program. For his assistance, he wouldn't be charged. Moreover, John gave him his own $100,000 check for the capture of El Topo, and all of this was for one foolish and principled kid who was finally released. Goodbye.